Video, we are talking about the ultimate guide to shadow work. And I want to explain this in very real world, practical language. Not a bunch of life coaching buzzwords. That with your manifestation on a Tuesday when Mercury is in retrograde, find your purpose. We're going to look at why you should even consider doing shadow work, what it is, and most importantly at the end, I want to give you a few techniques that you can do after this video. Let's take it from the top. What the heck is the shadow? The term shadow was initially introduced by psychologist Carl Jung. Some people pronounce it Jung. Just don't say young Carl, because that's definitely a SoundCloud rapper somewhere in Ohio. He studied under Sigmund Freud, and he was obsessed with the unconscious mind. So right now you're conscious, hopefully. You're listening to the words, you're thinking through. That's your thinking power, your thinking brain right there. If you know anything about your life, most of it is actually subconscious. And then deeper, there's unconscious, what you don't want to look at or you're not even aware you can tap into. Stanford did a famous study that you have over 60,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them you're not aware of. They're habitual. Take the first time you drove to the gym, you were conscious of it. You were looking at everything and, you were trying not to crash. But then what happens? You do it long enough, it becomes habitual, and you can slam a Chipotle burrito, crank the radio, and you zone out. You show up to the gym and you're like, how did I not crash? It was autopilot. It's become a subconscious state for you. Where I'm going with this is that if you're unaware of the things in the background of your mind, don't you think you're going to get some benefits from looking at those, from addressing those? Most people are using just that 5% to try and make a change in their life, but can you imagine what happens if you start tapping in and looking at the other 95? So the shadow is anything that's in the unconscious or subconscious. What can be stored in the shadow are memories, past traumas, fears, limiting beliefs about yourself, stories of when you went wrong that are still playing when you go to try and do that thing again in the present. Some of these can be very deep in the shadow, things like trauma, addictions, lots of guilt around it. And others can just be more shallow but still buried fears or stories about why things won't work out for you. Now the next part is why. Why even talk about the shadow? Isn't this kind of a buzzkill? And if I'm trying to be in a high vibe, shouldn't I just flood my brain with just positive thoughts, high vibe habits all day? Absolutely you should. But there's also benefit to bringing things out of the darkness, shining a light on them. I've often used the metaphor of a trash can. You got one in your house. What happens when that trash can starts to fill up? Stinks up your whole house, doesn't it? And so you might do something like most of us do. We take a cardboard box or a pizza box and we push that trash down, but that doesn't actually make the trash go away. It just gives you more room to throw more trash on top of it. Eventually, it overflows, stinks up your whole house until it's too much. You realize it's there, you take it out, and it smells better, hopefully. Well, that's the same thing we do with our past, with our traumas, with our stories, with our beliefs, our doubts, is most people are just trying to shove them down deeper. Nope, it's not there, I'm just gonna think different. But then it shows up when they try to go for their goal, or they try to get in a relationship, and there's something from my past coming up. 99% of people are completely numb and unaware of this, and they think it's too painful or fearful to look at. And if you operate from that way, it is like having one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas at all times. You want to start that business, but the fear that you're not enough or you're unqualified is holding you back from really letting it take off. And the people who don't have that are going to pass you by. You want to be in a relationship, but you're terrified of being hurt because of your past, and so you're paranoid in the relationship, and you end up self-sabotaging it. Which, by the way, the shadow is where all self-sabotage comes from, every single ounce of it. So one of the most enlightened things you can do is notice patterns in your life, in your behavior, that show up for you. 9 times out of 10, I would even say 10 times out of 10, it's something in your shadow that's causing you to self-sabotage a good thing. So let's review where we are. The shadow is the unconscious or subconscious, and you suppress down what you don't express. And it doesn't make it go away like the trash compactor. The trash is still there. You actually have to remove it, take it out, look at it, and throw it away. And when you do that, you will feel free, integrated, light. That is letting go. That is what therapy is. That is what coaching is. That is what journaling is. All of those tools are methods to metaphorically take out your internal trash so it's not stinking up your internal state. You want an example? Let me give you a quick story and then 2 important notes before I give you these techniques for you to try. So I was working with a client who was a struggling musician, and he was in our metamorphic program. Now, he wasn't bad at music. He wasn't struggling because he was unqualified. He wasn't even struggling because he couldn't get clients. See, despite him having all the credentials and the skills, he still had this deep-rooted belief that he was actually unaware of. He held on to the belief that commercial success was the antithesis of true art. Because growing up, he heard things like, that band sold out. That person is mainstream. And so through shadow work, through really tapping into why am I self-sabotaging commercial success? Like, why do I not charge what I'm worth? Why do people say they want to give me a bonus and I turn it down? I say, no, it's okay. I'm just happy that the album did well. He realized it came from his pure judgments he had in college and growing up. He wanted to accept the money so he was financially free, but in the back of his mind, he had things like money is evil, money means you're a sellout, money compromises the integrity of your art. By accepting that commercial success didn't mean sacrificing artistic integrity, he got out of his own way, relieved that block, and he started gaining his financial freedom. He started being okay charging what he was worth, accepting the money, that he could gain both recognition and financial stability. So don't you see in that case, that client's problem was not more hours in the studio, was not getting better at his craft. It was literally as simple as letting go of these stories and these judgments and these fears that I'm going to be a sellout mainstream. It's going to compromise my artistic integrity. That's the power of techniques like I'll give you and shadow work. Now, I mentioned there's 2 very important notes here that I want to touch on before these techniques. The first is the myth that everything you are today stems from childhood. And I see this a lot. Like, people get into inner work or shadow work and they go back to a time they were 7 years old or 14 years old. Is there truth that a lot of your fears, beliefs, stories come from childhood? Absolutely. But I also want to give you permission to not just look at, well, one time I was 7 years old and my mom left me at the supermarket and I'm damaged for life. It can be as recent as college, as your last relationship, as a boss who was a total asshole to you and super toxic work environment. All of those things can put blocks in your shadow that if you look at and you heal from, can help you. So that's the first note, is don't just go directly to childhood. Yes, that's important, but I've seen it as recent as the last relationship really getting in the way of the next one. The second is Clark isn't looking at the shadow negative. Won't that make me feel bad? Do I have to do that work? It's uncomfortable. I totally get that. But here's the beautiful thing I've realized through doing I don't know how many hours of this. Behind all negative actions lie a positive intent. Brief personal story on this. When I was drinking, in my 20s, I would drink pretty much daily, and I realized that it was a way for me to numb my internal judgments. Social situation, it was uncomfortable, family gathering long-term, uncomfortable or bored. I would drink, loosen me up, and it would bring out more of who I was. But that part was already within. And so when I stopped drinking, what I noticed was a low-grade social anxiety come up. I'd be around people or, events or gatherings, and I would be like, whoa, this thing is still here. But once you realize it, you can find healthy ways to integrate it and challenge it. But you can't if you're numbing yourself. So you see how the positive intent of alcohol was chilling out more. That's it. It was just being more okay, loosening up, being who you are naturally. Maybe you've outgrown the coping strategy that was maladaptive for you. So the 2 things, everything stems from your childhood, yes, but also recently. And the second is behind every negative action lies a positive intent. The goal with shadow work, the goal with journaling, the goal with therapy is to get on your own team and realize what the positive intent is that your maladaptive coping strategy is covering up. With that said, you ready to tackle a few techniques? All right, here's 4 of them for you. Technique number 1, projection awareness. Now, a projection is one of the ways that your unconscious or subconscious tries to express itself. Projection is when you snap at your partner even though they did nothing wrong. They look at you like, dude, are you okay? Or you snap at work, or you snap in a friend circle, or it just gets too much and you have to let it out. Most people label it as stress, but it's been said that stress is just the high achiever's word for anxiety. When you call it what it is, it's fear, it's doubt. It's something unresolved within yourself. That's a projection. So projection awareness is a habit that you can get into, and it's something you want to do throughout the day. It's anytime you see yourself getting irritable or judging someone else, ask yourself this question: how am I that? It's very, very simple, but don't write it off as like, oh yeah, okay, that's simple, on to the next one. How am I that? Some people call this the mirror, because when you look into the mirror, what does it show you? It shows you the reflection. It has no opinions of its own. It has no distortions of its own. It's just showing you that reflection. Now, you might not like the reflection in the mirror, but that doesn't mean cover it up and hide it and never look at it. That's just the objective truth coming through. And so when you see yourself getting irritable or judging people, stop, put down the mirror, and ask yourself, wait, how am I that? How have I been braggadocious or egoic? Or, here I am judging this person. Where do I judge myself? Why am I so critical of myself? Oh, interesting. Where does that come from? And now you got a juicy nugget that you can go into and work on. Let me give you a story on this one. There's a guy who I remember who was a very high level management corporate setting in his work. And he would get so frustrated with the people he was training that they didn't follow directions, or they were incompetent, or they thought they knew it all. Through this projection technique, he was actually able to tap in and be like, wait, why am I getting frustrated with these people that are so hesitant, that are worried about making mistakes? Where does that come from? How am I that? And he realized that when he was getting into the role he's in, he had the same exact hesitations. He had the same exact know-it-all attitude. He had the same exact issues that he was seeing in these people. What he did is he acknowledged his past struggles in a team meeting. When I was in your shoes, I was so afraid to ask for help because I didn't want to come across as incompetent. And that came off as actually that I knew it all. And when I'd make mistakes, I didn't own them. And through recognizing and having empathy of where he was before and how he was projecting all of that onto these guys, it opened this dialogue that they looked up to him as a leader. They started trusting and confiding in him more. Now, one last note on projection awareness. What's really cool, and I think positive here, is yes, this is true for the negative. Like when you see a negative trait in someone and you judge them for it, chances are that's in us and we're seeing ourselves through the mirror. This is also true for the positive, that oftentimes the qualities that you admire in other people, those are the unrealized traits you have within yourself. Technique number 2. This next technique is very simple, but it's powerful. Don't write it off, literally, because this one is the forgiveness letter. What you do is you take out a sheet of paper and you write a letter to someone or your younger self, what you forgive yourself or them for. One of the things I believe keeps people stuck in the past is not having closure. Like there's something in psychology called an open loop, that if you see a story start to unravel, your brain zooms in and latches on because you want to see how it ends. I got to see the ending. Pairing that with your life, if there's not closure in relationships or situations or phases in your life, then there's sort of an open loop in your mind that keeps you in the past. And so what this does is helps you close those loops, even if it's not physically possible. Like say if you didn't have a good relationship with a parent, they passed away, this comes into play a lot because you can gain this closure without, going through a psychic medium and talking to them through the dead. So this technique is a forgiveness letter, or we can call this a closure letter. You're going to write a letter to a past version of yourself and forgive yourself for a lot of the mistakes and for you not knowing any better. Or you're going to forgive people around you. 2 questions to really help you doing this is ask yourself, who am I still angry at? What am I still not over? And I guess a third would be, what mistakes do you still replay and beat yourself up and self-attack on from your past? If you just take any one of those and you write a letter to it, and don't write it off as like, oh, that's kind of cheesy. Oh, what am I going to write this letter? Push all those judgments aside. This is one I've benefited from immensely. And so writing that letter, you realize sometimes the person you need to forgive, it's yourself. Shadow work technique number 3. This technique is more ethereal, harder to put into words. It's more of a practice or a process. It's the conflicting parts recognition. So in psychology, there's something what is known as cognitive dissonance. Fancy way of saying trying to believe 2 things at once. 2 cognitive dissonance. Fancy way of saying trying to believe two things at once. Two things that oppose each other. It's very uncomfortable psychologically. It's very draining. I love the word dissonance because bringing our conversation back to music, dissonance is when there's like one note out of a chord that doesn't belong there. And it creates this eerie sensation. But when you clear up the dissonance, that's when you get chord progressions. That's when you get scales. That's when you get harmony. So it's the same thing in our life. When we have these two conflicting parts, it feels uncomfortable. It feels tense. And you might not notice that's there, but it might show up as feeling stressed or feeling anxious or feeling in a funk or low vibe. So when you clear this up and you resolve it, now you have harmony internally. For the example, I'll give a personal one here. In my 20s, for the longest time, I said I wanted freedom, because I didn't grow up with it. My mom was a school teacher. We had multiple kids in the family. We didn't grow up super rich, no trust funds, no silver spoons. Graduated college, I was 30 grand in debt. I had to move back into my mom's basement, and I felt like my head was underwater. I was trying to get my head above it and breathe and get a sense of relief from all the stress that not having money brought. So my true north was just freedom, 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 freedom. And surprise, I'm not in mom's basement anymore, fortunately. And the YouTube channel sort of took off, and I've been very fortunate on this journey. I don't say any of this to brag, but a lot of those early freedom financial goals got checked off. What I realized is that sense of freedom kept moving. Whatever number you set for you, this could be 100,000 and then it moves to 500 and then it moves to 1 million. You never feel like, yes, I made it. I'm completely free and that's no longer there. And so I saw that. And recently, this past year, I've really been looking at this dissonance of like freedom, but never feeling it. What is going on here? What I realized is freedom for me has changed. Freedom for me has changed from a financial number, and it's transformed into freedom as a state of inner peace. Freedom from that internal inner critic. Freedom from your internal self-judgments. Freedom to do whatever you want on your path, not just a path that society is like pushed down your throat of more and better. And so conflicting parts, recognizing them, and not forcing a resolution in one sitting, like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out and release it and I'm free forever. Understand that this is a process and things are gonna keep coming up. But once you have this tool, you can start to realize, okay, where's the dissonance I'm feeling? What two things are conflicting in me? The need for love, but the fear of vulnerability. The fear of them leaving, the fear of loss, but also the pleasure of gain. The pleasure of getting known and serving people, but the fear of being misunderstood and torn down. You often find that truth is somewhere in the middle, and that's a beautiful thing. Shadow work technique number 4, dialogue with the shadow. It's probably the most effective one you can do. This technique requires you to invite in the part of you that you're repressing or suppressing and have a theoretical conversation with it. Now you can do this in a voice memo on your phone if that's easy for you. You can do this typing on a computer or your phone, but I like to do it in my journal because I find that when you're limited to how fast your hand writes, you don't get this neuroticism of just your brain trying to like talk at 300 words per minute and you confuse yourself even more. So what I do is I picture 2 chairs. On one chair, you're sitting there. And on the other chair, directly across from you, is this shadow, is this behavior. And you're looking at it and you're inviting it in to have a conversation. Now, again, I know this sounds kind of woo, kind of out there, but stay with me here. Start with viewing it as a third person. So it's not a part of you, it's its own entity. Take the example of fear of judgments. So you invite in this fear of judgments and you start a conversation with it. You might start with things like, why are you doing this to me? Why do you exist? Why are you so afraid of being judged? Where did you originate? Pause here. It's very important that you don't judge it. Ironically, you're judging judgment. You're just listening to it. You're letting it talk. You're letting it voice its concerns. You might find things like, well, I'm here so you perform at your highest. I'm here so you avoid that rejection that you faced in your 20s. You need me. I keep you at your best, don't you know? And then what she tries to do is enter the viewpoint, have intense empathy for this part of you. Why do I exist? Why am I doing this to them? And if you want a really detailed explanation of this, because I think this one deserves its own video, I'll link down below our first version of shadow work, and I go over this technique in that video. There's a saying that awareness is half the battle, because as soon as you're aware of something, now you have a clear path of what you need to work on and you can resolve. Like smoke clearing a room, you can see things for what they are. not as you think they are. That's exactly what this technique does. Inviting in the shadow, having a conversation with it, and getting the awareness, bringing it into your conscious mind, what you're suppressing, repressing, what's in the unconscious or subconscious in your life. This one is deep, and it's what we actually do in our metamorphic program. So if you want more info on that, I'll link down below where you can apply if you're interested in doing some of this shadow work. We have a real cool technique. If I can say that, I think it works very well. I've seen people get new relationships. I've seen their jobs improve. I've seen their energy go through the roof when they start releasing some of these blocks. It can be challenging, not impossible, but definitely difficult to try and solve solutions with the same thinking that's creating the problem. And so what we do is we pair you up one-on-one with a master level, we call it inner shadow shifting coach. He's able to use some of the best techniques that we designed specifically for this like self-releasing, self-healing work to get deep into that shadow part of you that you're not even aware of, help you work through it and help you release it. That's in week 3. There's a whole lot more, but that's relevant to what we're talking about here. Again, if you're into that, click the link below and apply to speak with one of our coaches for free, but only if you feel called. It's totally cool to try these techniques out first. If they work, you're getting a lot out of them, you want some extra support, some one-on-one help, apply down below. What I'll actually do now is link up a perfect follow-up to this video. It's our first video on this shadow work, start to finish, and I'll go really deep into this like 3-2-1 technique in there, give you a lot more like 5 steps on how to do it if this is something you feel called to and you want to try. Keep the conversation on the shadow going. I'll link it up right there. And thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was useful, but more than that, I hope you take one of these techniques, you run with it, you use it, and you benefit from it. I'll see you in that video. Stop settling, start living. See ya.